This is not what defeated South Vietnam. This is not what defeated South Vietnam. This is not what defeated South Vietnam. This is. You have been misled about the Vietnam War. With a focus on the American side of the war, it was romanticized into a David versus Goliath story. The ragtag Vietnamese farmer fighting the overwhelming firepower of the American military. However, alongside the American troops, the South Vietnamese military was not nearly as well equipped. Throughout the entirety of the war, its equipment often lagged behind that of communist forces. The communists were the first to deploy an assault rifle. Most had AK-47s by the Tet Offensive, while the majority of armed troops were still stuck with Garands and carbines. South Vietnam deployed armor first, but it was quickly countered. RPG-2, then 7 anti-tank rocket launchers became a common sight by mid-war. The Allied equivalent, the M72 Law, only came much later. Even in terms of armor, the North deployed T-54 medium tanks first. American assistance was forced to leave behind the M48s in response. North Vietnamese artillery outranged and also had more firepower than South Vietnam's, making counter-battery fire effectively impossible. And the North was the first to deploy anti-tank wire-guided missiles, the AT-3 Stagger. The American TOW missile would only be given much later. It is clear that while American forces had the best equipment, it often left its own ally out to dry. The only exclusive advantage that the Republic of Vietnam armed forces had the entire war was its air force. All Allied forces relied heavily on air support. Facing the flexible and fluid communist attacks, only the mobility of helicopters allowed Allied troops to respond fast enough. Strike fighters, from the F-4 Phantom to the A1 Skyraider, became the main platform to deliver heavy firepower. In the late war, it was the only thing that could match communist heavy howitzers. Forward air controllers provided near total coverage of the country, providing live information gathering to commanders on the ground, while directly guiding in strike aircraft onto their targets. The Allied Air War became the foundation of American and South Vietnamese operations. Expansive, reliable, necessary. As the United States was leaving, it equipped the South Vietnamese Air Force to do the same. As a part of Vietnamization, the VNAF aggressively expanded from 22 squadrons of 486 aircraft to 44 squadrons of 1,285 aircraft. It was given a strong foundation of A1 Skyraiders, UH-1 Hueys, and C-123 providers. Newer jet aircraft such as the A-37 Dragonfly and F-5 Tiger were delivered as well. South Vietnam was trained to rely on an Air Force backbone. While the American assistance was building up the VNAF, Soviet and Chinese assistance was quietly equipping the People's Army of Vietnam to wage combined arms conventional warfare. The Communist bloc delivered T-54-55 Type 59 main battle tanks, 122 and 130mm state-of-the-art howitzers, various types of APCs, along with 2,000 new trucks and 10,000 tons of oil and gasoline to support it all. Last, but definitely not least, a new battlefield technology was delivered to North Vietnam, the 9M14 Maoyutka anti-tank and 9K32 Strela-2 anti-aircraft guided missiles. While the Maoyutka added to an already large repertoire of anti-armor weapons, the Strela now gave communist infantry a reliable way to take down aircraft. Designated as the SA-7, the Strela was a man-portable, shoulder-launched, infrared sensor-guided missile. It had an operating crew of just one, and a rough, effective altitude of 9,000 feet. However, in rare cases, it could hit targets above that. While it had difficulty chasing down fast-moving jets, the Strela was expected to reach propeller-driven aircraft and helicopters. It was during the Easter Offensive of 1972 that the Strela would make its debut on the battlefield. On May 1st, while the Battle of Quảng Trị was underway, it shot down an O-2 and Skyraider. The following day, 2 more Skyraiders and a Huey were taken down. Within just 2 days of being deployed, Strelas took down 5 aircraft. However, the overall effect was more crippling to ARVN forces on the ground. Operating mandates were immediately enforced for all Allied aircraft. Aircraft operating below 10,000 feet needed to fly faster than 450 knots and be equipped with flares. Slower aircraft, such as helicopters and propeller planes, were forced to fly above 10,000 feet. This included the FACs, forcing them to lose much of their ability to acquire targets. As a result, many strike aircraft were forced to fly with ground-based radar. At the same time, in Region 3, at the siege of An Lọc, air support was desperately needed to deliver supplies to ARVN troops completely surrounded by communist forces. SA-7s pushed the situation to the breaking point. Helicopters and C-123s were already being shot down by AA fire. But when the Strelas were deployed, they were forced out of the battlefield entirely. Cargo drops from the US Air Force C-130 became the only option to deliver supplies to the besieged troops. 3 of the C-130 Hercules were lost trying to deliver supplies until the high-altitude, low-opening Halo drops started to work on May 8th. It was just in time. On May 11th, the People's Army of Vietnam would launch its final, last-ditch effort to break the city in half. The defenders barely survived. It is likely, without the last-minute deliveries of ammo, food, and anti-tank weaponry, they never would have been able to hold on. Even an AC-130, an aircraft made famous by many movies, was shot down for the first time in South Vietnam. On June 18th, Spectre 11 was operating in the A Sao Valley. It was flying far above the 9,000-foot range of the Strelas, but the missile fired at it happened to perform better than usual, reaching and destroying the right engine. The Spectre crashed, taking 12 of its 15 crew with it. The missile had been deployed from the side of the mountain, demonstrating one of its core strengths. While the older anti-aircraft artillery needed to be set up on stable, flat ground, the Strela did not. Now, for the pilots in the air, death could come from anywhere. At its very introduction into the war, the SA-7 already removed the VNAF's ability to operate in areas where enemy troops were present. Only the US Air Force, with its more capable AC-130s, C-130s, and F-4s could reliably fly safely over the battlefield. Even then, several of these aircraft were shot down as well. From May until June 30th, 10 US Air Force and 6 Vietnam Air Force aircraft were shot down by SA-7s. This was about 40% of the 41 aircraft lost in that time period. After the Easter offensive, the United States continued its course to withdraw. American assistance executed operations Enhanced and Enhanced Plus. Enhanced restored the Republic of Vietnam armed forces back to optimal combat strength. Enhanced Plus, on the other hand, added several more capable aircraft to its arsenal, including 3 F-5E squadrons and 2 C-130 squadrons. While these programs made the Vietnamese Air Force look impressive in the news, with the media repeating constantly that the VNAF was the 4th largest, most of it was now out of date. With the exception of the C-130s and jet aircraft, the vast majority were low-performing aircraft. The older aircraft were not fast enough to outrun the missiles at low altitudes, but at high altitude did not have the new avionics needed for guided weaponry. The new aircraft themselves did not have the electronic countermeasure equipment, which were desperately needed to counter guided weaponry. Even with the advantage given by the current SA-7, the Soviets started to deliver the newer variant to the north, the Strela-2M, or SA-7B. Its effective range was increased from 9,000 feet to 15,000. This, alongside all of the new equipment being sent in, the North was able to form and send down the 2nd Air Defense Division to the south in November 1974, effectively locking down major regions of the country to air support. The Strelas took their toll, robbing the VNAF of its air superiority. From the ceasefire until December 1973, 154 helicopters were lost. Recon RC-47s were forced out. Even 4 RF-5s were shot down by SAMs, leaving South Vietnam completely blind. By mid-1974, 136 SA-7 launches downed 23 aircraft. Radar-guided AAA shut the VNAF out of major parts of several military regions. While the photo ops of equipment sent to South Vietnam appeared impressive, the majority of it became useless. In certain airfields, all Skyraiders were put into storage due to their new vulnerability and logistical shortages. The Air Force could no longer do its job. It would become increasingly ineffective as the end of the war drew nearer. Only the bravest pilots were willing to support the troops on the ground. In 1975, with the country collapsing around them, it was these brave pilots of the Republic of Vietnam that continued to fight until the very last day. Even when it was clear that Saigon would fall, A1s were still in the sky, protecting Tan Son Nhut Air Base. One was shot out of the sky with an SA-7. An AC-119 gunship also circled the city continuously, lighting flares and firing on advancing communist forces. It would eventually be hit by an SA-7 as well and crash into the ground in flames. An American on the ground reported seeing one of 3 parachutes get caught up in the debris, burning up in the air. The Strela was the perfect weapon for the infantry-based People's Army of Vietnam. It was portable enough to be carried by any single individual, which made it usable in the densest jungles and tallest mountains. Even with its size, it was still capable of taking down South Vietnam's best aircraft. While the Soviets did not equip the North with an air force that could rival that of the South, it could definitely remove this disadvantage. The idea that the communist forces were made up of ragtag farmers making do with punji traps may have been true for the earliest parts of the war, but it is a romanticized, emotional narrative. North Vietnam was always handsomely equipped by its Soviet and Chinese sponsors. The Republic of Vietnam was not taken down by guerrillas, but rather a conventional, well-equipped North Vietnamese army.